even if you are without symptoms, you are encroaching on their individual rights because you're making them vulnerable.
Fear wants to protect you from everything, including yourself.
Okay, this means masking forever. There's no limiting principle at all. So all of this has to do with a public health rethinking of the way we all ought to live our life. And this was stated nowhere better over the weekend than Dr. Anthony Fauci, the great and sainted, he who guards St. Peter's pearly gates. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the greatest doctor in all of human history, never flip-flopped on a single issue except for every single issue, has held more positions on every single issue in the pandemic than the Kama Sutra does with regard to sexual positions. Here is Dr. Anthony Fauci now explaining that you need to mask up. And the reason you need to mask up, even if you're vaccinated, is because let's say that you're vaccinated, and let's say everyone around you has had the opportunity to get vaccinated. You are encroaching on someone else's right not to get sick. I wasn't aware that someone else has a right not to get sick. Who guarantees this right? Should we all lock ourselves in our homes to prevent this from happening? Like what is somebody else's right not to get sick, especially from people who don't know if they have the virus? We're not talking about somebody who's out there coughing and spitting. We're talking about somebody who, for all intents and purposes, is not sick. You have a right not to be sick from them, says Dr. Anthony Fauci. Interesting. Here we go.
A person's individual decision to not wear a mask not only impacts them, because if they get infected, even though they say it's my decision, if I get infected, I'll worry about that. But the fact is, if you get infected, even if you are without symptoms, you very well may infect another person who may be vulnerable, who may get seriously ill. So in essence, you are encroaching on their individual rights because you're making them vulnerable.
Okay, so here's the thing. There may have been a certain logic to this particular position last year when there was no vaccine, when there was no way to protect yourself. Once N95s were widely available, this stopped being the case. Once N95s, which are very productive, apparently, against transmission of the virus, once those were available, if you really want to be protected, you wore an N95. Okay, put that aside. Forget about the masking for a second. Now, everyone in the United States has had the opportunity to get a vaccine. In fact, the vast majority of people who are seriously vulnerable have gotten the vaccine, meaning everyone above the age of 65. 90% of all Americans above the age of 65 have gotten the vaccine. He is now suggesting that I, the vaccinated person, right, who did my due diligence, did my duty, got the vaccine, that it is now my responsibility, even if I am completely asymptomatic, to wear a mask because you have a right not to be sick. Okay, this means masking forever. There's no limiting principle at all. At all. Because it turns out that people are constantly getting sick from each other. My kids, in a normal circumstance, are constantly coming home with a cold. They're constantly coming home sick with something. This is what it means to be a child, right? Basically, classrooms are giant petri dishes of kids getting each other sick. Do my kids have a right to be free of illness when people don't know they are transmitting it? I am unaware of this right. But once you establish this right, there has to be a gatekeeper. And who is that gatekeeper? Who would own the power to tell you what to do on a daily basis? Why wouldn't it be Anthony Fauci? Wouldn't it be Rochelle Walensky? Wouldn't it be all of these people? Now, the media have glommed onto this with alacrity, and it's been fun to watch members of the White House angry at the media for upplaying the threat of the virus. This has been happening a lot. So, for example, the New York Times had a headline last week that is just inaccurate, right? It's just alarmist crap. The headline was, CDC internal report calls Delta variant as contagious as chickenpox. Okay, but that really wasn't the headline that they put out on Twitter. The headline they put out on Twitter was breaking news. The Delta variant is as contagious as chickenpox and may be spread by vaccinated people as easily as the unvaccinated, an internal CDC report said. Okay, that's just misinformation. That is not true. The reason it is not true is because vaccinated people are infected far less often than people who are unvaccinated. So the New York Times just puts out a false tweet. Okay, this actually led members of the Biden administration to yell at the New York Times. I've noticed that tweet has not been taken down. That tweet is still up over at Twitter. They've not been in any way cracked down on for misinformation. However, Sky Australia was taken completely, they were suspended from YouTube. They were suspended from YouTube supposedly for promulgating misinformation. What exactly was the misinformation? They suggested that mask mandates and lockdowns in Australia have not been a successful strategy, and YouTube took them down. So the way this works is that if you are super duper alarmist in your misinformation, then it gets to stay up. If, however, you are not alarmist in your actual correct information, you may get taken down anyway. How's this for a title? Ben Shapiro Show subscriber destroys like button with clicks and logic. I'd watch that. Make it happen, gang.